We know the Islamic regime will sacrifice Hezbollah and any other of their proxies to save themselves, and that they've suffered virtually no losses and no repercussions of their own for the terror that they've unleashed across the region and well beyond. We know, dear friends, that while we hear death to Israel, it just pops the cap on their way to the death to America and all that America has represented to the world. That's at stake. We know that Israel represents more than a vitally strategic ally of singular democracy and basic rule of law and great swaths of Sharia rule. We know that Israel at its core represents the Jews, and the Jews do now, as they have so many times in the past, represent freedom of expression, law, and order and morality. This is the Common Denominator, and I'm Ilana Rachel Daniel. Welcome back to the Common Denominator. I'm Ilana Rachel Daniel. Clearly, I didn't know what I'd be saying to you today, but as of this moment, Wednesday, August 7th, 2024, I offer some impromptu and surely incomplete thoughts of my testimony from here in Israel. In light of our enemy's psychological warfare, the inhale that won't exhale, we can reflect on what we already know and some of what we don't. We know that the Islamic regime, with its Buddhism buddies and Hezbollah and proxies across the region, are threatening to hurt the men, women, and children of Israel and claim to not care for the fallout that might follow. We know that they would aim to damage the multiple resource infrastructures that civilization has come to depend on. We know that if they do, Israel can and will hit their own, causing exponential damage. We know the Islamic regime has been waiting to launch their long-announced regional war once they have nuclear capabilities, of which they have pined for long decades. We, the people, don't know for sure if they have those capabilities already, but from words dropped from politicians here and there, there's indication that they might. So too the regime's willingness to escalate into war. Either way, they're darn near. Why don't we? We, Israel, we, America, we, the West, act now. Why must we fear a preemptive strike on those who openly plot and plan and call loudly for what they will do to us when they are able? It would be acting in defense to act now in offense. An Israel that would finally take action has its hands tied by those who hold their capability to do so. War is a terror to all but the echelons who benefit, but we have no luxury of naivete of those who come to wage it all the same, and we're obliged by God to protect life with all that's in our power. An apt quote of Churchill's applies here. If you will not fight for right when you can easily win without bloodshed, if you will not fight when your victory is sure and not too costly, you may come to the moment when you will have to fight with all the odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival. There may even be a worse case. You may have to fight when there is no hope of victory, because it is better to perish than to live as slaves. We know Hezbollah, the regime's crown jewel, is Iran's first big shot, but they only get one. We know the Islamic regime will sacrifice Hezbollah and any other of their proxies to save themselves, and that they've suffered virtually no losses and no repercussions of their own for the terror that they've unleashed across the region and well beyond. We know, dear friends, that while we hear death to Israel, it just pops the cap on their way to the death to America and all that America has represented to the world. That's at stake. We know that Israel represents more than a vitally strategic ally of singular democracy and basic rule of law and great swaths of Sharia rule. We know that Israel at its core represents the Jews, and the Jews do now, as they have so many times in the past, represent freedom of expression, law, and order and morality. Not because we're a nation of saints, but because the Torah given to us to represent in the world is the soundest structure of society and civilization, and is intended for the benefit of mankind in all. We know there is no comparison to our fight to save our lives, and theirs only to take it. We know that never has the display of weakness that the US and West shows more emboldened the bullies in the Middle East than at this moment. And yet the weakness of the jihadis is apparent for all to see, not only in their exposed oil and gas depots that could be demolished in an instant, but in the pathetic display of men who aim to murder en masse only to prove that they are strong, who live to hate and to kill and have forfeited their humanity. We know the Islamists of the world are weak, for they have no self-reflection, and without the ability to self-correct, one becomes rigid, unyielding, and fragile. We know that the wild card is how far will Russia, China, and North Korea go to in their involvement, and that this is the greatest fear of all to you too, dear listener, that the moment would be seized by the world's bullies to pull the whole globe into war. A world fighting its own battlefronts will have little time and resources to lend their friends in equal need. And we know, we know, that October 7th was the gunshot start of World War. It was the call for Islamists across the globe and the axes that support them to rise up and wreak havoc in pursuit of terrible rule. And this horror we see in Bangladesh as I now speak. The terror on the faces of the Hindus are so familiar. So too are the twisted grimaces of their jihadi attackers. We saw them just before. They're the same of October 7th, 10 months ago today. We know that in some ways, this is no more about Israel than it is about Bangladesh, but it aimed to create a global caliphate. It's the same vying for power throughout history, only now the weapons are more fearsome than could have ever been imagined. I do imagine, though, that were a certain success to be achieved, God forbid, Iran and China and Russia would find themselves facing one another on who will take the final reins. The utter foolishness of those in the West who invite it can never not inspire painful awe. We know that the shape-shifting nature of Jew hate means there is no right answer to how Israel can behave. There is no place the Jew may call home, and there is no defense that will be acceptable to those who cannot accept us. We know that of all of history's great bastards, we must doff our hat to Vladimir Putin, as he provides the Islamic regime Iskander missile and Murmansk BN electronic warfare systems, then frowns to the camera and says he told them to go easy on us. Putin has assets to protect, you see. Their investments in Iran are increasing. Russian companies are currently investing in and developing 7 Iranian oil fields with more planned, not to mention a deal in the makes where Russia swaps its gas for Iranian oil. Russia and Iran recently signed a 20-year comprehensive cooperation deal, which would give Russia first right of oil extraction in some parts of Iran, as well as closer military cooperation between the countries. For its part, Iran has been supplying Russia with massive quantities of drones and missiles to barrage Ukraine, and its supply, of course, mustn't be halted with the onset of a war with Israel. Take away that sweet, sweet oil from Qatar and Iran et al., and there's nothing left of the regimes but sand and jihad. And then the fog clears while the West bows deep. You've heard that Israel faces enemies on 7 fronts: Hezbollah and its embodiment of Islamic rage, and the absurd but lethal Houthis, who, like all parasites do, sacrifice their host nations of multiple millions to bring their jihadi dreams to life. To live to murder. How twisted can the human elements be made? 10 months since October 7th, and it's a wound that is still fresh and bleeding. I tell you now, it will never heal in the lifetimes of those of us who saw it, because we've experienced in real time the sensation we felt in our Jewish DNA when we read and learned of it happening in the past. That very specific way we have been hunted and precisely torn to pieces. Of all the threats we face in missiles, drones, and rockets, and the reverberations of that fallout, it is this up-close savagery that chills like no other, as it comes from those we live among in every way and every day. The forecast is doom and gloom on every channel, and it leaves us traversing a continuum of emotions, hoping against hope, fear, darkness, ignoring it while we can, and then a resolute commitment to fight like hell, maybe a few times a day. It's surreal to go about summer days, Middle East hot, and all the daily grind that reflects your own, but to do it knowing at any moment from any direction, in any manner, we might need to dash and run, or get down flat as we're told is best to avoid drone shrapnel. A moment of quiet reveals how insane it is that we must endure this. An entire sovereign democratic nation sitting around waiting to be bombed. What madness has taken the world that this sees no protest? What corruption of humanity that it's justified? 7 nations threatening to murder 10 million people. What folly has become us? At the beginning of the war, I wrote that this process of dehumanization would lead to the apathy, if not outright cheering of Israel's destruction. So unable would people be to see reality before them. I wrote it hoping we'd see our way out of history's loop. Were Israel to have done what they say, stolen a tiny sliver of land that we claim means all the world to us, and treated those who lived here badly, is it deserving of mass murder of women and children alike? Can you fit all your worldly grievances into a single legendary villain? Can you write your claims out on one page and see how they contradict reality, and often physics? All our human refinement, intelligence, beauty, and innovation, we face the very same folly hastily redressed over and over and over again. Will the world say whoops before Jews are killed en masse? Or must we have the privilege of teaching that tough lesson again? I believe in God and that He alone is ultimately in charge. I believe that the Jewish people are eternal, but I have no illusions that what has befallen us before can again. I believe in the free choice we have been tasked with. I blame the maniacs, these unironic villains who live their real lives to take others. How strange. Is it a bug in their software? Or did they lean all their weight onto 1 or 2 buttons and shut out the rest of humanity that could have influenced it? I blame our leadership, our global Western leadership. They fumbled a great, if not in so many ways, the greatest civilization that has ever been. I blame the present leadership in Israel and many of the past. We've spent the past months on this podcast illustrating the impossible choices that they avoided. Choices that whichever they chose might have wreaked tremendous loss, and even then perhaps not pan out for any good. But someone should have stopped the buck long ago, because every question they avoided has landed onto our laps now at once. It could make you bitter. We have gone Aiden here in many ways despite our difficulties. A perhaps yet unrealized one largely waiting in potential. But to live as Jews in our land, to unfurl our arms, to tan and be gorgeous on the beach, to peer deep into our texts, to sow the land that gives us more than food, more than milk and honey, breath and life and roots. A life of 4D to a world in 2. Our troubles great, raw in our guts, for we know, oh, we know, that ultimately we must each answer to God for the things that befall us and our specific peoples. Each of the peoples of the world should be in reflection. Chatanu, avinu, avenu. We have sinned and we have erred. Our Father in heaven, Father, King, Creator, Judge, be our Father above all, and have abundant mercy on us. Not because we deserve it, but because we want to deserve it. Because we still cling to you in a world of confusion and dissonance. Because we still seek and we still choose, and we can still feel the soul of the land through the soles of our feet. Because we choose it, even when we supposedly don't have to. We choose it because we know we do have to. We have committed every sin, and we pray for a mercy that we don't deserve. That God will not meet our actions with equal actions for our sins, but instead act on the good that we have done, for it is no less true. We never stop praying the world will wake in time. We never stop praying for the truth that sits plain to be acknowledged. I understand why people preface Hitler's rise to power with the devastating state Germany was in, for the incoherence of Corona days, the mismanagement, the misleading, the manipulation, the moving our human senses onto the machines of smart tech and social media have unsettled our human condition. Those mistakes, malicious or negligent, broke people's ability to believe. And before they could find their ground again, the board, the players, and the rules kept changing. At this moment of relative quiet, it is with gratitude to feel gratitude in our world of discontent. The joy of walking this land, to look upon the faces of those we love. Would that we didn't savor it only with the proverbial anvil over our heads. Years from now, our great-grandchildren will read of this time. For my part, I wonder which food will be used to commemorate it. We proceed without naivete, but not without hope, for that would be to lose the whole point of the endeavor. Israelis are a beautiful and difficult people. We are a nation with a past who are figuring out every day our present. The uniquely Israeli experience is not only the surreal absurdity of sitting around waiting to be attacked by multiple nations with advanced weaponry and perhaps worse. It's that which we excel at most, the dark dregs of our humor at those who continuously try to kill us, and our absolute expertise at embracing the moment. So here, in the in-between, we exhale. I'm Ilana Rachel Daniel, and this is the Common Denominator.